Hi, this is Seamless, and once again, I'm holding the microphone because I have no mic stands that I'm not currently using for something else. But this is the making of Sometime, the track that I made almost entirely to experiment with a particular kind of bass and organish kind of distorted chord combination. And that combination will be this, if you haven't heard it. That's more or less 100% why this track was made. Other cool things happened in this track, including this particular bass right here. That's kind of a giant mistake, which paved the way towards learning and doing cooler things. I suppose I could talk about the mixing as well. Well, really, there's not much to this track except for just how that bass happened, and that's kind of intentional. Also, something else I experimented with was having unusually high amounts of high frequencies. Because if you listen to this track and listen to some of my other stuff, you might notice that this is seriously high frequency stuff. And that's because I've noticed that a lot of professional tracks and tracks that other producers I know make have a lot of high frequencies in them. And I wanted to see if that was because I have a particular monitoring problem, or maybe I'm just deaf. So I decided to see how this one would go down. It turned out that what I was doing was just fine, and that at certain points, how high frequency this thing is, it gets kind of annoying. At least to me. Other people seem to enjoy it, because maybe they're deaf too. Who knows? We may never know. So let's start at the beginning, and we'll talk about what's going on for things that exist. All right, so three things are happening right now. There's two different kinds of ARPs happening, and then the main chord is being filtered in. There's lots of automation, as you can see over here. That's what all this is. And so let's go to like here and look at the ARPs. So this is the preset, a Harmonizer preset Tronic. That's all that this is. I may have messed with it a little bit, but I don't think I did all that much. I'm doing the ARP by going into the channel settings, function, and then messing with the arpeggio business over here. There's ways to do that within Harmonizer. I just don't, because I'm used to doing this from years and years of not having Harmonizer. So that's what's up. And so the chords that I'm using are the chords that I chose for the main chord and bass progression, just ARP. Not a huge. Good stuff. The other ARP. And this is a Nucleon preset. I didn't make this either. I just took it and layered it in there with stuff. I tend not to do that as much nowadays. Like in my latest track, Empire, I actually made every single thing that you hear in that track from scratch. And that's just because I have more understanding of how Harmonizer works and how these sounds tend to work in general. But I don't really care if I use presets, and you really shouldn't either, because honestly, like, it's about the end result. And I tend to, I'm all about the sound design, so at least for bass, I'm really all about the bass sound design. So really beyond that, I don't really care. But if you're a producer and you want to make a sound, then make the sound. But if you want to make a song and you don't really care where the sounds come from, then just use the sounds. I have nothing against that, and neither should anyone else. So yes, and then there's some risers here. Actually, these are all just holding patterns from the previous progression. All the risers are here in this pattern. I believe. Yes. Okay. So what I'm doing in Not this one. This is just the. That's just a detuned saw, super saw thing. And then this is a phaser riser that I like to use. So what's cool about the phaser is that in Harmor anyway, is that it's based on Harmor's additive existence, is that you can make your own phaser shapes. If you want to go there. Okay. So this looks just like two big old on-offs right now. And I did that because it kind of creates an interesting like LFO effect, like volume LFO. Basically, so I just watch the visualizer here, see watch what happens. And then at the very end, there's a slide note. The actual rise is happening because of the slide note. That's usually how I do that. I don't tend to build in my rises into the patch itself. But I'm gonna solo just the build. I'm also playing it in the song because I'm automating the phaser speed, which can't be attributed to any of the internal businesses. So I have to do that manually. But just watch again and listen to it by itself. And by itself, I mean without all of this. Okay. People are talking to me on Facebook. I should really close Facebook when I'm doing these. So yeah, that's the phaser riser. I've used this in a number of tracks. It's not the same patch, but it's the same idea of the same patch. And the idea is that the spinny LFO thing that goes down is the phaser, and it's being controlled by the speed. Now the reason why I have two of these is because if I had one, it would basically like this particular configuration is because if I only had one of these configurations over the whole thing, it would be half as fast. And so I put in 2 because I wanted it to be faster. And again, if I wanted to be faster still, I would put in 4 and then also adjust the speed accordingly. That's how that goes. So then it drops right here. And then this bass happens. I'll talk about that in a second. But let's listen to the track for a bit. All right. I think that's actually everything that happens in the track right there. So this bass, the super squelch, is a distorted square that's been unison before distortion. And then I also messed with the harmonic use of pitch line edit right here. This is very familiar to you if you've been watching my most current how to bass videos, because it's a lot like how I do all the resets that I've been doing for all the drum and bass stuff. And that's because that's where this came from. More or less discover what was up when I messed up with this kind of business. Now this sound has an interesting aspect to it, is because I also employed a chorus. Now the chorus in and of itself is a pretty natural effect to put these kinds of on these kinds of things, except that this is an audio effect in Harmor. It's basically attached to it after the additive effect is in this part. And what that means is that it's always running. Once the song starts, the effect is basically going. And this is important because this means that if I play the sound just in the pattern, it will sound different than if I started out here and then play the sound as it came. And that's because the chorus has had time to propagate itself for a second, and that means that it changed the nature of the effect itself. Which is unfortunate because there's a couple times in the song where these basses with these sort of pukey green color things show up that just made absolutely incredible modulation that was the result of where the chorus was, and I have no control over that. I mean, I can kind of control it by selectively increasing the depth and the delay at certain points and then bring it back and bring it back in again, but it's more like throwing something than it is actually automating it. And like I have yet to really try and mess with that just because I fear its power. But yeah, let's talk about the main bass. because I do kind of interesting things with this. So what's going on here is that I have kind of the same thing as the square bass, so it's just a saw, unison, and distorted, and then that's it. But what's important in this one is that I go into the unison pitch thickness envelope editor. And so what this means is that as time progresses in this very short moment here, it goes from the maximum value down to nothing. Now, why don't I just start at nothing? This is what it sounds like when I start on nothing. I want it to spread out a little bit before it eventually comes together. Because if I don't go to nothing, you get that crazy modulation, which is cool sometimes, but I wanted it to be stable. And so what happens is that it goes through the modulation, and then when it gets down to here, it basically freezes it at a point where the waves are spread out a certain way, phased a certain way, panned a certain way, and then it just stays there. And the only modulation that's applying to it after the fact is the prism that's going on here, because that's just going to continue going. If I wanted to, I could. There's a prism, yeah, harmonic prism. This is how that's controlled. There should be a prism. Yeah, well, there should be a thing somewhere. Yeah, prism amount, and I could do the same thing with the prism, but I didn't. So that's why that's cool. Now the thing about this bass is that it's a very simple bass. It's a very simple kind of. I think it's a filter attached to it. It's like the most simple thing in the universe. The whole reason that it exists, though, is to be played with the chords. It's basically the bottom of the chord, because the chords by themselves are kind of tinny and bad. At least in my understanding. Now, these chords I employed the harmonizer, and really what the harmonizer is doing in this setup is that it's octaving the chord position. Harmonizer is actually kind of weirdly complicated and very in depth, and I don't really have a huge grasp of what this stuff does. But I do know that the amount, increases the amount that the higher or lower one is affected. The width determines how much of the spectrum it's cloning. Because what it's doing is it's cloning the harmonics and then transposing them. So the width determines what amount of it is being cloned. So if I went down all the way down, it would only clone the fundamentals. If I went all the way up, it would clone everything and make it higher. And then the strength is how hard? I forget. I already forget. You can look at the manual. I could look at the manual. I should look at the manual. Manuals are informative things. Indeed. There's some EQing going on, probably. Yeah, and there's also a filter engaged, because as in the beginning of the track, it was filtering in. Yeah. Filtered to taste. Same thing with the main bass. Wait, I lose track of the position. Whatever. So then we have this FM bass. Now this FM bass is really just the normal FM bass type that I employ. In fact, I think this is no, this is a newer one. You can kind of hear the warble there. That's because what I've basically done is I've made 1 and 3 two separate output oscillators, and then I FM those individually, and then I also changed the pitch of one of them so that you get that pitch difference warble. I also put the second operator, which is actually the modulating operator. It's a triangle wave. I put it out for sub reinforcement, but it's also a sub reinforcement of the sine. Of the triangle. So it gives a pretty interesting timbre to it. And I also frequency split it. This is like the first time I ever actually earnestly tried to frequency split something. And there's this orangey guy here. So basically there's EQ going before it, there's a reverb, and then I split it, and I have a Maximus going on each of these, and then I applied interesting and weird compression for all of them. And stereo effects or not stereo effects, as the case may be. Some of the saturation for distortion really low, as you can see there, and like that created a weird kind of similar but not quite so similar sound that you get out of that. Not really a humongous difference, but it was enough to make it just a little bit more interesting than it would have been otherwise. So this jazz, I actually covered exactly how to do this in my video, How to Laser. And what this is it's a laser sound. Like most laser sounds, you go to pitch and you make it quickly go from one point to another. Pop, 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 pop. Been popping all the time. And that's all well and good. But then what you do is you go to part B and you make it be the opposite, so that it's coming from two directions into a single direction. That's what that is. And then I have another one that's this guy. And this is just a crazy detuned Supersaw thing that I'm just throwing around. I really didn't pay attention to what I was doing when I made this. I just threw stuff, and then because it's a doodad. It's a filler kind of weird crazy sound. And so you make a weird crazy sound. It just crazy do stuff. And Harmonizer is really good at making weird crazy sounds. So that's what that is. All right, what else? The other FM bass. Okay. This guy, I believe, is only just, yeah, so I applied a whole bunch of choruses for no good reason. Also reverb and then some EQ. Yeah, but the effect that you're getting, I miss having two hands. The effect that you're getting is I have the X and Y modulation, and that people have been asking me like how the X and Y is not doing anything, because you have to set it, and like I'm pretty sure I showed how to do that, but let's talk about that again. So what X and Y mean when I use it is that in FM you have a carrier and a modulator. In Citrus you have your various attributes that can be modified by modifiers like these. These are attributes. These are attributes. These are modifiers. And so mod is the modulation input modulation, as it says up there, input modulation. So I am modulating the frequency of operator 1 by operator 2, and so I want to control the amount of modulation input into operator 1. And so I go to mod. This is modulator, which is confusing because this mod down here is modifier. So modifier X, and then I set the line to be here like this. So that means that as modifier X is down here, the modulation input is also down here, and so it is up there. So it's 1 to 1. So that's what that is. And then I also have secondary modulation of the high harmonic, which is also going into op 1. And that's what modifier Y is for. The secondary modulation and 4, basically the mod input of 4 and 5 are being controlled by mod Y. And that creates the difference in sound. Like I'm going to disable that guy, and I'm going to play it, and I'm going to mess around with the Y. You can see what that does. Because what that's doing is that this all is modulating operator 1, but then op 6 down here is modulating ops 4 and 5. And 4 and 5 are the high harmonics, which create the vocal kind of sound when applied, when there's also a fundamental frequency modulating the original operator. And this is all super theory and like really in-depth FM stuff, which I've talked about before. And I guess I should talk about it again because I haven't talked about it in a while. But so yeah, that's what that is. And that's also what this is. I only have mod X going on because I liked where it was with the mod Y. I think I've pretty much covered. Okay, so mixing and drums and stuff. So the drums, like before, like I mentioned in How to Make Empire, if you caught that, I got these out of the Groove Machine library, which you can get if you. Groove Machine is a product that ImageLine makes. It's a standalone plugin that is designed to you can create and play and organize grooves to produce performance kind of things. It's kind of neat. But in order to facilitate doing all this, it comes chock full of an imaginable amount of samples and neat stuff. And A lot of them are drum samples, and a lot of them are very good. So when you download the demo for ImageLine, for Groove Machine, not ImageLine, you download the demo for Groove Machine, you can just straight up, once you install it, you can just straight up take the samples from the sample directory. And that's what I have done. And that's more or less where these samples come from. So, but I am also messing with these samples. I usually apply EQ to accentuate certain things. In the kick, I like the low, but I don't like the low mids. I don't know what that sounds like. You know, that kind of thing. I like the high clicks, but I don't like the mid high clicks. That's kind of what's going on there. This is all seriously like the taste kind of stuff. Same thing with the hats. The hats are EQ'd to be only the highs, and certain frequencies I got rid of because I heard them and they didn't sound very good. Really reverbed. Reverbed also, reverb wide kind of thing. Now the snare. Kind of thing. This is something that's kind of hard to control because this is it has there's like the mid tone and also the high kind of fuzz. But again, this was a track that I was trying to accentuate there being more high frequencies than average of my own stuff. I also put on a reverb. And now that effect you're hearing, the kind of after bump going on, is not because I have the. Actually, I might have the reverb delayed. I totally do. So I have the reverb delayed actually, so that it doesn't start immediately when the hit happens. It starts a little bit after. I believe I only have it up for 2. Yeah. So it kind of sounds like a hat hit almost. That's what I'm going for that. And then in the main compressor, I basically leveled everything off. I made sure everything was super max, and then in the master I use soft saturation to keep all the attack in there. Soft saturation, as I've discussed before, is a form of compression that basically distorts the signal. It's kind of like clipping, only it's not actually clipping. It's not a very good explanation of what that does, but that's kind of what it means to me. Because normally your normal compression type would do this. Versus, but of course, if you turn it up too high, it'll do that, and you don't want to do that, so I don't do that. At least I don't have to go too high, but sometimes that effect can be very useful for things that I don't do in this track. So I also sidechain the crap out of everything. Sidechaining being where, let's see, where's the sidechain bus? I have it labeled somewhere, right there, side. So everything is being routed into the sidechain bus. Once my video stops freezing, okay. And then I only have 1 filter, and Empire I had 2 filter. It's a limiter. And Empire I had 2, 1 for kick and 1 for snare. And the reason why I only have 1 now is because this being electro track, the snare and the kick hit at the same time, which means that I only really need 1. So that it's basically just a kick. You determine this by right-clicking here, and you can see the list of inputs. I have mine labeled so you can see them clearly, but if you don't, this could be like insert 1 through however many. And so I select kick, and then it's sidechaining by the kick, and that's what that's going on. And what this accomplishes is it makes this nice big old hole that the kick fits into. And this means that the mix isn't pushed as high, whereas the kick would normally sit on top of all this, creating epic compression problems. In fact, one of the compression artifacts it would create kind of sounds like sidechaining to begin with. And that kind of ducking sound, I believe, is where that effect probably came from originally. Actually, sidechaining probably came around for the purposes of vocal ducking, but I like to think that that's why it happened. So anyway, that's what I do that for. And then it all goes into the master. I cut below 30 hertz because not a whole lot's going on down there, and if it even is, most people won't be able to hear it. I have two Maximuses engaged. One is doing the super. I'm using soft saturation during the drop because while it's distorting everything, when it goes up that high, everything's already a kind of sharp, distorted sound, and so that's kind of good. The sub isn't really distorting. I'm keeping it that way because if the bass isn't distorting, then and everything else is, it'll still sound kind of smooth because the bass will be smooth. But during the chorus, when I have lighter things going on, I'm not actually doing anything. When did I use? I must have only used it for the intro. Or just never. Wait, oh, there it is. So over here, I have the other Maximus engaged. And the point of this Maximus is that it is not using the soft saturation, so things will not distort when it goes over the threshold, because I have all... in the beginning anyway, you have these kind of quiet round sounds, and then when they do eventually get to be louder than 0 dB and it compresses it, with a soft saturation, you will hear the distortion, and that kind of sounds like clipping, and it's bad. So I have another Maximus engaged, which uses only the normal compression type, which comparatively very smoothly brings the volume down in the face of loud sounds. So that's why I do that. I obviously didn't need to do that for choruses because they're already kind of loud and huge, I guess is why I did that. I think for Menagerie, I did 2 Maximi in the same regard for that same problem. So yeah. I feel like I covered everything. Yep. Okay. So if you have any questions about something that I may have missed, let me know. I'll answer them to my best of my ability. And thank you. Thank you very much for watching this video and watching all my other videos. And have a good day.